In order to be a gentleman, you must understand the gentleman. In order to understand the gentleman, you must understand how the gentleman thinks. In this video series, The Blueprint of Self-Mastery will expose the core of who a gentleman is. Therefore, if you decide to initiate this journey, you know exactly what to expect. Let's dive in. What's up, folks? Grandison Shines here with the League of Prestigious Gentlemen. In this video series, we're going to talk about the core of who the gentleman is, the gentleman mindset. This is not a very sexy topic, but it's a very necessary and imperative topic, because in order to understand who the gentleman is, you must understand ultimately how we think. And it's very, very nuanced. Just like anything else, there are complexities, there are some things that are easier to understand. So in this video series, we're breaking it all down. If you decide you want to be a gentleman, this is the place to start. This is what's going to initiate that forerunning thought of all the things that we're going to be talking about in order to facilitate you becoming the man that you are supposed to be, the leader that you are supposed to be. I'm of the impression that us men, we need to step into our rightful place. In order to do that, we must understand how to think differently so we can get different outcomes. So let's dive into the conversation. The first day's conversation, this first video's conversation that we're going to be talking about is the gentleman's operating system. There's a certain operating system that you must download, for lack of a better phrase, in order to adopt this, or I should say become, not just adopt. This must consume you in every action and who you are being as a man. In order to do that, you have to understand that the internal mechanisms of how we think are vastly different. Now, here's something that I'm very convinced of. There are a lot of information that I put out there regarding videos talking about men, but even more specifically, and I'm very, very clear on this in the video, I'm talking about a gentleman. And what happens is people superimpose just the average guy's mindset over the information that I'm talking about. No, we're not doing that, because in order to understand what it really means to be a gentleman, you have to understand that there's separation. There's distinctions. There's separation from just the person who has a different social and or behavioral cultural archetype assigned to him, besides the one who's going to be a gentleman. So we're going to be very definitive in this video series about how the gentleman operates, how he thinks, what are some of the motivating factors of why he does what he does, all with integrity, all in character, in good character, and making sure that we have or we experience success in our lives in the different areas. So here we are again, talking about the gentleman operating system, a very important operating system which to acquire. So what do we do here at the League of Prestigious Gentlemen? We help men develop the standards and skill sets and the leadership, the self-leadership, the self-mastery required to become a self-purpose, self-driven, purpose-driven gentleman. That's exactly what we do. And the big outcome is that there's success in the 12 areas of life. There's success in personal opportunities, there's success in relationship opportunities, there's success in financial opportunities. And so when we talk about the 12 areas of success, that's represented by this particular graphic right here. Just to give you an example, there is success in the financial area, and as a gentleman, we acquire the opportunity or the skill set, the knowledge, the wisdom, the know-how to be successful in all 12 of these areas. So one thing about these 12 areas is that they will never go away. They will always be a part of your life. You may have some limited access, for instance, being a parent. If you're not a parent and you acquire older age and you never become a parent, that's something that you don't need proficiency in, but you still know how to understand how to relate to people. So what we're talking about right now is in the category of social calibration. How is the gentleman socially calibrated so when he's out in the real world, he has a certain level of conduct within himself? And when we start talking about how to initiate the proper conduct, this is where I get a lot of pushback on the videos as well. Because unfortunately, young men nowadays, and I believe this is going to be perpetual, that's why this video will be evergreen, young men nowadays don't have the drive and or the person driving them to understand how a gentleman should act, and how a gentleman should conduct himself when he is in the public arena. Very distinct. There are some people that grow up with two-parent households and they never learn these types of opportunities. How to sit, how to stand, how to walk, how to conduct yourself, how to speak clearly enunciate your words, how to become. And there are some people that will push back and say that being a gentleman doesn't involve being a good communicator. That's absolutely wrong. If you ever decide to look up the history of how the gentleman came about, you'll see that these people were lords over certain areas. They had certain clout. They're right underneath the knights, and they had to have very good communication because they dealt with and consumed a conversation with a lot of people. They engaged with a lot of people. And so you have to have high level or elite level skill sets, now executive level skill sets in operation to show up in the professional area as a gentleman, to show up in the social area, socially calibrated with manners and character and how to interact as a gentleman. When it comes to the personal areas, if no one's looking, how do we act still with integrity and we will still do the right thing even though no one is looking? Because it's not about just putting ourselves on display. It's about being able to consistently integrate with others in a meaningful and impactful fashion and continue that over an extended period of time throughout many, many years. So let's dive into the content. Let's start here. True power begins with an internal operating system. And an internal operating system, that something that we all have, is just some operating systems have more bugs and some of them are more towards they have the security and they have the protection and everything else that goes on with it so that the operating system can still stand despite the pressures of life. That's what we're looking at. So when we look at the external expressions, these are what I'm going to explain are just three different things. These are high level, and there are many other opportunities subjected underneath that. So if you want to comment and say, well, you forgot this, trust me, whatever you're going to say may fit into one of these categories. But let's talk about how we interact with people, and this is where the nuance comes. So if we look at the opportunity that we have here, we have for external expression first, we look at good manners. Unfortunately, somewhere down the road, parents stop teaching good manners. Grandparents stop teaching good manners. Uncles and aunts stop teaching good manners. We still need to have good manners. Nowadays, I can have someone walk right in front of me, inches away from me, and won't even say, excuse me. Because for some reason, we don't teach those things. But if you want to separate yourself apart from the average person, and this is exactly what a gentleman does. We're separate. We're not in with the main crowd. We sit at the top, separated, and we operate by different principles, i.e. our operating system. Here, manners. Manners do matter. Manners matter when you're meeting someone. Manners matter when you're sitting at a table and you're sharing a meal and you have your significant other there along with another couple. Perhaps there's a business deal needs to come across. The manners are imperative. And some people wonder why they never get ahead in life. And I believe that a lot, whether we want to admit it or not, a lot of people notice whether or not we have good manners and how we conduct ourselves in the social environment. And if you're one of those that don't have manners, then you're far away from being a gentleman, and this is where the learning opportunity comes into play. The second thing we're going to look at is refined style. If you ever do your history, again, every gentleman had a refined style. He had a style of how he presented himself, from the clothing which he adorned himself to the accoutrements, to how he presented himself with his significant other or alone. He created his own brand. And it was very much so refined, very fine-tuned, very polished. The grooming was impeccable. Everything about this gentleman said high standard. Somewhere down the line, we stopped teaching that. But those values still have their place today, and people do listen to and look at those values when they're presented to them. They respect them almost automatically without even knowing the person. There's a level of respect, level of trust and credibility that automatically sinks in about when you present yourself in a certain way. And this is what this is all about. This whole journey is all about that. And the third thing that we want to talk about here is the opportunity to show a level of sophistication, calibrated sophistication, or what we're calling social sophistication in this area. When you are at a place, your manners, are they refined, but do you understand how to sit appropriately? Do you understand how to talk appropriately? Do you know how to turn down a drink appropriately? Do you understand when to start eating a meal when you have others with you, and which table utensils to use first, primary, secondary, tertiary, coordinate, right? Understanding all these types of opportunities. That's where we separate ourselves from being a gentleman. And then we get down to the internal operating system. That's what we have when we start talking about what drives the gentleman to do the things that he does, to show good manners, to show sophistication, and to show how he is engaging and collaborating with people in the outside world. The operating system, what drives it? Here we go. 3 things that drive this operating system. 1 are the principles that supersede impulses. Principles that supersede impulses. It is imperative for us to understand that the principles are the drivers. The impulses are the things that we have mastery over. These are things that we understand how to control. And it is very imperative for us to understand how to institute a level of control over not just what we call the outside opportunities, but also the inside opportunities of the man himself, self-mastery. A man must understand how to master these 5 things: his mind, his will, his imagination, his emotions, and his intellect, and how to utilize those tools appropriately. And when you understand how to utilize those tools appropriately, it definitely makes a difference in how you interact with people in the real workplace environment or the social environment as well. Look at the next one. We're talking about responsibility. Responsibility that supersedes convenience. Responsibility, another word that we can utilize here also, which we'll talk about later, is accountability. Owning up to the things, the choices, the decisions that you made, and even also the outcomes of those decisions that you make. This is important as well. We are driven by accountability. There's no blaming others. And as we always state, accountability always rolls up at least 1 level. So if you ever have children or you work in a workplace environment and you have people that are subject to you, guess what? If they do something, that also has a level of responsibility and accountability for you as well. Why? Because accountability always rolls up at least 1 level. Remember that. And then the final thing that drives the gentleman as well into this particular opportunity that he makes sure that he exudes is the purpose the purpose which supersedes the popularity. Purpose supersedes popularity. For a gentleman, it is about being purpose driven, as we stated earlier. It's about being intentional. It's about being strategic. All these things do matter in order to facilitate the right mindset when launching anything forward that a gentleman does. Purpose, not what you have, and that's embedded with who you are. Not what you have, not what you do, but who are you and what is your purpose in life? I ask that question to every single person that comes into the program. If you're in a group coaching or one-on-one coaching, you're going to get this question asked. That question is, who are you? And even if you're operating in the forge, that question is, who are you? You must understand who you are. Again, outside of the external things, not what you have. That doesn't define you. Not what you do. That doesn't define you. You have to understand who you are as a person, and then you can operate and step into your purpose. And every one of us has a purpose, and we have a purpose that we should understand how to discover. But there are so many people in life that never get to that particular point. Finally, we see this. Most archetypes are reactionary. Most of them are reactionary. A gentleman's archetype is not reactionary. The gentleman is intentional. We focus on being very intentional, very deliberate, very purposeful in how we operate and do things. Everything has a reason. We know that it's a choice that we also operate in, which we'll be talking about in this series as well. And he does not allow emotions to dictate actions. This is one of the big distinctions and separators. And I'm convinced that most of the women that are commenting in the social media platforms, or on the social media platforms, when we talk about a gentleman, they too also assume that it's just the regular guy, because the comments represent traits that are not the operating system of a gentleman. And so they have to renew their understanding of who they're talking to, who they're dealing with. In fact, I'm convinced that most women have never dealt with a gentleman. Yes, a gentleman has become that rare. And if you're in the dating scene right now, you understand what that looks like and what that sounds like. So the emotions never dictates our action. We have the ability to compartmentalize the emotions, separate them, then compartmentalize them for a minute or a moment, and momentarily do what we need to do, execute, and come up with an issue, a problem solved, or an issue solved for that particular opportunity. Outside of the emotions. Remember that, outside of the emotions. Let's continue reading. So it says the actions dictate the actions, the circumstances to determine standards or external opinions to define one's identity. The gentleman knows who he is. The gentleman knows where he's going. The gentleman has a strategy. He might not tell you what his strategy is, but guess what? We definitely know where we're going. Here is the graphic in its totality, understanding that if you're a member of any of one of the coaching programs, you get this presentation, you also get the video, but you also get this particular graphic here that you can utilize in understanding the operating system of a gentleman. Make sure that you like, subscribe the video. If it hit home with you and starting your journey as a gentleman, do follow us and make sure you follow us on social media. But also, if you're ready to step into your role, your purpose, the purpose-driven gentleman with the successes in the personal, professional, and social area, then step into The Forge. The Forge is a monthly program where you get access to what we call the Vault plus other perks. Go to leagueofprestigegentlemen.com/The Forge right here at the bottom, leagueofprestigegentlemen.com/The Forge. Read about that and then sign up. At the moment, it's only $30 a month. Very palatable for the information you're going to get if you're going to start this journey. All right, folks. See you in the next video. Bye.